members of the Committee Against Torture, it is an honor to be here today. My name is Samuel Brinton, and I'm a survivor of conversion therapy, a set of dangerous and discredited practices designed to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. When I was a child, a licensed psychotherapist tried and failed to change something I never chose. I am here with the National Center for Lesbian Rights Born Perfect campaign to request your help in ending this cruel, inhuman, and degrading practice. He tied down my hands and placed ice on them while showing me erotic pictures of men. He wrapped my hands in hot coils, stuck needles in my fingers, and shocked me with electricity. Through all of this, I remained gay, but became suicidal. I learned to lie.
Sam Brinton is a hero in the LGBT movement, applauded as a voice of courage. He's a sought-after speaker whose testimony is used to promote bans on therapy that would in any way guide a gender-confused child down a heterosexual path. He's a co-chair at the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and together their goal is to make this kind of therapy illegal in all 50 states and throughout the world. They've already been successful in several states across the U.S. But is there anything wrong with Sam's story or the legislation he's promoting with the National Center for Lesbian Rights? A closer look reveals a shocking surprise. Sam claims he was in his torture therapy for years.
I was in therapy for like 2 or 3 years. It was the worst 2 or 3 years of my life.
Yet when asked to provide the name of his therapist so that the therapist could be exposed and lose his license, Sam claims he can't remember. "I don't have his name," he says. "I can picture him in my nightmares, but his name is not there." Strange, since he can seem to remember all the other torturous details. The kinds of details that trauma survivors usually forget. Even more strange, Sam's memory seems to serve him well when it comes to remembering to request money for a speaking fee when he tells his story. Sam claims that it was a doctor who treated him.
When I was a kid, I was subjected to a combination of talk therapy and horrifying physical aversive conditioning techniques by a doctor who told my parents that he could turn me straight.
But in a previous interview, he originally admitted it was never a doctor who treated him. It was actually a religious therapist and not a doctor. It's very important that the donors who fund SAM and the National Center for Lesbian Rights do not discover this, because the legislation they promote and solicit money for affects licensed mental health professionals, meaning it would do nothing to prevent the torture experience Sam claims he went through. His testimony changes further when he and the National Center for Lesbian Rights talk to their donor base. Keep in mind, Sam is 25 years old when he is telling this.
We started this work a few years ago. I had many people telling me the 1980s called, they want their issue back. And I kept saying, I'm sorry, but I didn't go through this in the 1980s. I went through this a couple years ago. When I was 10, my parents took me to a conversion therapist who promised them he could make me straight.
Though his story of torture therapy falls apart under examination, Sam is still celebrated as a model for children's sexual self-acceptance and sexual freedom. His lifestyle, however, actually leads down a path that most parents and children would not want to follow. Here is the worst part about all of this. The legislation actually harms children who have been sexually abused by someone of the same sex. Those confused children who at times report unwanted feelings they can't get rid of as a result of the abuse are now unable to be treated for their unwanted same-sex feelings. All the therapist is allowed to do is simply address the topic, but there is no exemption for being able to treat it. If the therapist and client attempt to resolve those unwanted same-sex attractions, it's considered anti-gay and therefore illegal. Would any therapeutic organization allow torture as a therapeutic practice? Of course not. All 50 states already outlaw any therapy which uses punishment or shame under standard of care guidelines. So why would LGBT organizations promote this? Only to ensure that gender-confused children receive no guidance in a heterosexual direction. That is their real goal. There are many people who wish they had the opportunity to resolve their unwanted same-sex attractions or transgender feelings. Take Patrick Mitchell, for example, who began transgender hormone replacement therapy to become a woman at age 12. Then, at 14, after years of estrogen treatment, changed his mind and sought help to instead be affirmed as a male.
You know, one minute you're really convinced you're a girl,
Yeah.
and then you think, well, I'm happier being male.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened?
I guess I just realized that I could be happy without completely changing who I am.
The majority of children with gender dysphoria will not grow up to be transgender adolescents or adults. But I think the challenge is that we're not able to definitively predict for whom gender dysphoria will continue and for those that it may not continue.
Or adults who become post-surgical transsexuals, eventually regretting their decision and wishing they had gotten therapy instead when they were young.
You know, I woke up from the operation and I got these big boobs and the vagina and the whole thing, tubes hanging out here and there, and it's like, wow, what have I done?
If a child does not want to become transgender or gay, is it right to deny that child the freedom to resolve their unwanted attractions? Or should they be told that their only choice is to live out those unwanted feelings?
How do you avoid gendering your children?
We didn't choose anything but gender-neutral names. We chose not to know what sex they would be assigned when they were born. Not answering the question, is it a boy or a girl, to avoid the B word and the G word.
Will therapy ban legislation become legal in all 50 states? Will children have the freedom and right to resolve their unwanted same-sex feelings? Or will pro-LGBT politicians ultimately have the final say?